This episode of the Casting Shadows podcast is part of the RPG A Day 2022 event. If you're curious about RPG A Day 2022, please check out the Autocratic blog at autocratic.com. That's Autocratic with a K. There, you'll find all the questions and all the rules. And even though we're most of the way through the month of August, it's not too late to get involved. This bonus episode answers questions posed for August 22nd through August 27th. If this is your first time to this podcast, thanks for checking us out. If you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back. And consider getting involved in the conversation here and on other Anchor role-playing game blogs. Anyway, let's get into it. This is a bonus episode of the Casting Shadows podcast recorded from the road, so the audio quality may be suspect. If you don't want to listen to it, that's okay. What is the purpose of this bonus episode? Well, many of the people participating in RPG A Day 2022 find themselves in a position where they are more often the game master, or maybe always the game master, and so might feel that they don't have any way to talk about the prompts for the week ahead of us, for week 4 of RPG A Day 2022. But this, dear listener, this is not so. For we, those of us who take on that role of Game Master, our character is the world and the people in it. And so there are many different choices that we could investigate to answer the prompts of this week. Maybe not in the same way that one person bonds with one character, but surely out there are non-player characters, there are cults and organizations, there are plans and agendas, there are histories and secrets of the world that can be shared, and is in part how you as the game master get to play. Like the weeks which precede it, we'll be taking a look at the who, what, when, where, why, and how for week 4 of RPG A Day 2022. And all of these pertain to character. The first question, that for Monday, which is tomorrow at time of recording for me, is who is your current character? All right, now on YouTube, I have recorded a week-long video with videos as long as mine that comes out sounding a little different. It takes a week to listen to that video? No. A video encompassing all of the prompts for 1 week. And it looks at one of the characters that I am playing in a campaign where I am not the game master. But this bonus, as I said in the introduction, is going to focus on my role as the game master and things that I can identify as occupying the same sort of spot in play as a character would be. Okay, so let's take a look at the notion of who is your current character. I'm going to confine my answers for this to something that people can see if they choose. So I'm going to draw from our Alien campaign, right? Our Colonial Marines based Alien campaign using the Year Zero system from Free League Publishing. So from a certain point of view, I could take one of the prime NPCs from this campaign and describe it as one of my current characters, right? I don't have one current character, even as a player. I'm playing in several campaigns, so choice is present. So I could take a look at a character like Major Ibrahim O'Bannon, or I could take a look at Brigadier General Charles Tennant, or maybe most interestingly for people playing in that campaign or people watching that campaign as the play sessions get released in their YouTube form, right? We could take a look at the ostensible villain of the piece, right? But will we? Will we go a little behind the curtain for the infamous Regis Lim? It's a good question. Of course we will. Mainly because the characters have spent a fair bit of time communicating with Regis Lim now, and they have uncovered an awful lot about him. And so they won't suffer from any undue spoilers if we use him, at least from time to time, during this bonus episode. So who is your current villain character? Well, that's self-styled Colonel Regis Lim. Probably not his real name. There have been numerous hints about that in the YouTube versions of the sessions throughout. I think one of the players has cottoned on to this fact, has noted this detail in passing, but maybe more than one. It's hard to say. All right, so Colonel Regis Lim is a former colonial marine who, upon exiting the service, launched himself into a highly successful but also notorious mercenary occupation, rising up until he came to dominate it and becoming, let's say, synonymous with actions that governments would like to deny all knowledge of, yet would rely on him to carry out time and time again, further fattening his already fat bank account and putting him within reach of the sorts of munitions and other military materiel that only governments tend to aspire. It's a great way to keep your hands clean and still get the dirty deeds you want done at a price that, by comparison, seems cheap. But who is Regis Lim? How has he been portrayed? Right? He has been portrayed as ruthless, as demonstrated by how he is willing to treat those of his operatives who get captured. It's kind of an explosive episode, let's put it that way. And when we discovered this fact, we also lost our first player character, one of our beloved colonial marines. Still spoken of lovingly by the survivors. How else has Regis Lim been portrayed? He has been portrayed as incredibly narcissistic. He's surrounded himself by automatons, not the high-quality, very expensive synthetic people produced by Weyland-Yutani, ostensibly his biggest contributor and secretive employer, but rather one of their competitors, Seegson. He surrounds himself with working Joes. And strangely, bizarrely, he has these obvious androids adorned with masks of his face. And our player character Marines have discovered that the removal of these masks triggers a self-destruct mechanism of quite lethal proportions. What kind of person surrounds themselves with servants like these? Peculiar. How much of this character is real and how much of this character is legend? And the Marines, in their dealings with, well, really in their attempts to survive the machinations of this character, they have discovered he is typically one or more steps ahead. He is conscious of his own security. He doesn't let people near him. He is prepared to leverage all the incredible technology of his time that he has easy access to because of his wealth, to ensure that he's able to continue his operations. Is he simply a madman bent on sowing destruction? Is he simply intent on doing whatever is necessary to become as rich as possible? Well, there are other factors that flow into this as well. He pays extraordinarily well, and the Marines have come face to face with a wall of cash that it was difficult, at least according to the dice, difficult to turn away from. Whatever ill-gotten gains he manages to garner, he's not above sharing them. But why? And what is his ultimate goal? Well, we'll talk about that more later on in this episode. Who is this character? How can they be so cruel? How can they regard life as being so meaningless and yet be so generous and strangely altruistic? It's a good question. And it's the kind of question that I hope an NPC can generate. When I present these characters, or characters like these, as a role, when I adopt them as an NPC to play in the moment in a scene with player characters, I don't want them to seem one-dimensional. I don't want them to feel that they're simply a name and a bunch of stats because a villain is required for conflict. I want them to have the same sort of depth that we would find in any decent player character. And so I hope Regis Lim meets that goal. The what question for this week is, what is your current character's current situation? Now, the character I was just speaking about for Who, self-styled Colonel Regis Lim, is not the character whose situation I'm going to be describing, although they are involved in this current situation. Instead, I'm going to look at the broader situation for the characters that I've had the great deal of fun of trying to represent. And I've been able to represent it in a variety of media. Of course, there's what I say during the session, and there's what we discuss during the pre- and post-game conversations, which are also a part of the YouTube record. But I get an additional layer, which I don't normally get when playing around the table, and that is by virtue of editing the videos and putting them out as part of this series of actual play events. I can annotate the screen. I can put text up and images up on the screen, which do a variety of things. Some of them, of course, are to explain rules or to explain rulings, or to provide details about particular rules for people who are learning the game and choosing to do so by watching actual play. So when a character takes a critical hit, the information about the critical hit and how it was generated come up on the screen, stuff like that. But in addition to system information, We also have setting information. We have notes about the characters. We have notes about the locations. We have email messages, or what passes for email messages in the Alien universe, appearing on the screen. We have hints about how information might be accessible to corporations that people might not immediately expect. So recordings from smart gun links accessible to execs at Weyland-Yutani and things like that. So all these little bits of their experience and the experience of people around them, secrets about people that they know, they get to play in ignorance of these things when their characters don't know them. But if they choose to go back and watch the videos, they can gain access to this information. They can learn that their regular pilot, Jumper, has a restraining order filed against her, against certain famous members of Weyland-Yutani. And that's kind of interesting. But why does this restraining order exist? What happened? And these are layers of potential intrigue that wait ahead of us. And one of the ways that the campaign has been run is to manage dealing with meta-knowledge. So as quickly as possible, I wanted player knowledge about the xenomorphs and character knowledge about the xenomorphs to be equal. So that was an early goal. But I was also working toward a goal where they might, at some point, come across files and information to demonstrate the level of culpability of Weyland-Yutani and other corporations in these kinds of experiments, right? Dealing with the potential use of xenomorphs and other alien species in warfare and other applications. And so I put these examples up on screen in order to demonstrate to them the kind of information that they have uncovered or have been uncovering or have been told. So again, approaching that unity of experience between player, you know this as a player and you know this as a character. And so one of the characters that we haven't really met in play yet, whose situation I want to relate with a 4.5-minute introduction, sorry about that, is Brigadier General Charles Tennant. Now when they started play, they had some information, they had secret information about their lives before, things that they knew, which during play became relevant. And some of the characters had suspicions about the involvement of Brigadier Charles Tennant in the death of the former Brigadier General assigned to the command of the Marines. Was he responsible? Was there, foul play, and was there manipulation behind the scenes to get him in this cushy post? They're not 100% sure, but they have enough circumstantial evidence and experience to not doubt it. Further, they know that funds slated for equipment and material purchases for the Colonial Marines, such as for advanced autodock systems, they know for a fact that these have been smuggled, or that these have been diverted, and that cheaper units have been installed in the ships that convey Marines to their destinations, and the money has gone to Tennant. So they know that he's dirty and putting the lives of their fellow Marines at risk. So what is the current situation of this Brigadier General? Well, so many things have come to a head as a result of the operations of our player characters and the manipulations of our villain that we just talked about, self-styled Colonel Regis Lim, that Brigadier General Charles Tenet has been brought up for review, and his aide, who we may talk about later, Major Ibrahim O'Bannon, has been working to try to uncover the plot in a way that there's no coming back from. He wants to send Brigadier General Charles Tenet to jail for the rest of his life with no suspicion of his guilt. What is the current situation of Brigadier General Charles Tenet? He was introduced to the business end of a smart gun and not immediately killed, but allowed to bleed out, pleading for his life, and not receiving the aid from his Marines that he denied to them because of his greed. A rather poetic end. Why was it done? Well, we can talk about that in another one of these. Or you can uncover it by checking out the actual play. The next question is our when question. When coinciding with Wednesday. All right. The campaign itself, the first session of actual play, was on September 13th, 2021. And so we're coming up on 1 year. And we have not consistently played, every week or every 2 weeks. Life makes it too difficult for that sort of thing. So when did I first start portraying these characters? Is in September of last year. When did I have a sense of who they were? Well, Charles Tenet was formed as one of the major pillars of the situation against which the Marines were going to be operating. Right. One of the ideas is that we were going to go through mission-based play, but that it would be a campaign. And so there needed to be some kind of through line from mission to mission. Now, part of that, of course, is the growing awareness of what Weyland-Yutani is up to and the horrible things which are being perpetrated upon innocent colonists on border and frontier worlds. That's part of it. But how is this allowed to continue? Right, was the question that came to my mind. And there has to be some kind of link of nefarious behavior and poor character that enables these corporations to operate with the impunity with which they do. And so to make that easily manageable, if there was going to be irregular play, so manageable for me to portray and manageable for players to remember, rather than have a whole series of handouts with clues embedded in them which are easily forgotten or lost or never noticed in the first place, it makes more sense to create characters such as the larger-than-life Regis Lim, a very easy man to hate, but also an easy man to come to understand. Not trust, not accept, but understand. And then the more deeply embedded in the shadows, Brigadier General Charles Tenet. Someone to realize over time might be a more significant part of the problem than you might want to believe, and who might seem to be out of reach. It's at least conceivable that you might wind up in a position to shoot someone like Regis Lim, a military commander, or blow them up, or vent them into space, or something. They're going to be somewhere near the field of operations. But how do you take down your own commanding officer? That's a question. And that's when I started to feel like there was a chance for a satisfying campaign. The where question for this week will reveal why I've chosen these two characters in particular. And maybe we'll see how I feel when we get there, because I'm just recording this in the car as I go. And maybe the third character that I mentioned, Major Ibrahim O'Bannon. So where are both of these villainous characters? Well, there are two ships smashed together in orbit around the very famous, or shall we say infamous, LV-426. Right? The character's former, or perhaps not former, ship, the Montebello, and the Brigadier General's ship, the Conestoga, the lead ship in the Conestoga class, which we see as the Sulaco in Aliens. So, they are both there. One of them rammed their ship into the other. Why was this necessary? Well, because Regis Lim had captured the Montebello, but not without doing it grievous harm and at the loss of his own ship. His boarding party, in desperation, takes the Montebello, but the Montebello's weapon systems are sorely in need of repair which he doesn't really have time to do before the Conestoga arrives. But he has many more tricks up his sleeve than the unsuspecting General, Brigadier General Charles Tennant, was prepared to handle. And so these ships are now crippled, bound together structurally, and plummeting toward the atmosphere of LV-426. As we have mentioned, this is not really a concern for the Brigadier General, as he is, well, dead. He probably won't notice the flaming entry of the planet, or the impact, should any of the pieces survive the flaming entry of the atmosphere of LV-426. But everybody else, including the player characters who are also there, is still alive and susceptible to those hot temperatures. So, where are they? Well, they're in orbit around LV-426, a moon of the gas giant Kalpamos in the Zeta Reticuli twin star system. And things do not look good for them. But we should not let go of hope. This crew and their villainous opponent, self-styled Colonel Regis Lim, have overcome more, maybe not more difficult, but have overcome incredible challenges before. And maybe, with a little luck, a little application of their native intelligence and their training, they'll be able to do it again. But for Brigadier General Charles Tennant, that guy's on an express elevator to hell, both literally in the real world and metaphysically, if in the alien universe there's a God. Now, the original where question is, where has the character been? But, as I mentioned before, if you want those kinds of details, it might be fun for you, it might be fun for me to see that you have checked out the actual play series on YouTube about where they have been and what we have done with them. Friday's question is why? Why do these characters that I'm putting into action to fill out the Alien universe. These characters that I have adopted as part of my expression of that world, why do they do what they do? Why are they villains? Why would Brigadier General Charles Tennant betray his trust, betray his oaths, betray his role and his duties to society? Why? Why would this happen? Why does this sort of thing happen? Why is kind of to explore that question itself of why. But there is a simple and obvious answer, and that is the very powerful motivation of greed. The character flaw of jealousy. Is not content to be in service. How does such a person rise to such a lofty rank? Well, maybe it's by being driven by a negative kind of ambition and not climbing up on a firm foundation of achievement, but rather climbing over others. Why does the character do what they do? Fear. Fear of discovery. Fear of prosecution. A whole catalog of negative character traits which can serve a character like this to obtain lofty goals like leadership, yet make its retention, hopefully, unlikely, and make punishment, again, hopefully, certain. The character of Regis Lim, which I get to portray, well, that's a different story, and there's more about that character that I'm not quite ready to reveal. But what the characters have learned is a sense of outrage. Being the tool of what has been done gives him unique insight, right, into the sins of both the governmental and corporate overlords of the society of this particular universe. Not to mention the sins of whatever other governments he has worked for. And having been a Marine himself, having come up through that brotherhood of soldiers with their notable and noble purpose, there is the notion of a scarring on the soul, a ripping and a tearing of identity. And if we take that as something to explore in a non-player characters, many of the other ways in which the character has been portrayed and many of the things in which the character has done maybe take on a certain degree of sense. Why do they do what they do? Why do they seem like someone completely removed from the normal conventions of human treatment of other humans? Why do they seem mad? Why do their goals, their ostensible goals of tearing down Weyland-Yutani and tearing down the government that spawned them, and yet serving the darkest sides of both of those forces? Why are they willing to sacrifice so many lives in order to save so many more? Why are they willing to be part of a problem, the discovery of which should result in their own eradication? Exploring these questions, I think, is part of the fun of being a game master and having the opportunity to create villainy on this scale, such as we see hinted at in Alien and exposed more clearly in Aliens. Finally, we come to Hal, representing the Saturday question for this week. How? do the characters do what they do? Well, in this case, in part, it's about the skills and abilities of those characters, the training that they have received, and their position in society and their position in organizations. But mainly, how these characters are able to perpetrate their atrocities, how these characters are able to continue without prosecution, is that they are allowed to. The watchdogs don't watch. The prosecutors don't prosecute. Perhaps they don't think they can. Perhaps it never occurs to them that they should. Or perhaps because they are in service. How does one prosecute one's own employer? What does that mean for us? Perhaps it's when obedience becomes more important in terms of obedience to one's source of income rather than obedience or loyalty to one's civilization's or society's ideals. There's a lot that is brought up in question form in Alien and is more openly expressed as a question in Aliens about the nature of society, about the role, about the who are the Marines sent out to find out what's going on, and who are the protected people left behind. I think it's an interesting thing to explore. So how are these villains able to perpetrate their villainy beyond their own natures? Because they are allowed to. And so the universe that I'm portraying when we run the Alien campaign is one that utterly fails the people that live in it on every level, with the possible exception of those notable few who stand up in defiance. The original question for how is, of course, how has the character changed? But once again, if you don't mind, if it's of interest to you, please check out the actual play of the campaign, and maybe that could be a topic of discussion. How, over the course of the campaign, have these villains changed, if at all? All right, this brings us to the end of this bonus episode. There will, of course, be the normal episodes for RPG A Day. We'll take a look at Setting Sunday and share a intriguing detail from a setting that I enjoy. That will be its own recording, and it will have any call-ins that have come in during the week since our last group recording. If you're interested in looking at posts that have come out every day, you can go and see them in written form on castingshadowsblog.com, which is where my RPG sharing online began. And you can see composite videos that, much like this, run through a range of questions for a whole week. You can find those on YouTube at youtube.com/runeslinger. But if you've grown tired of listening to me talk as a result of this particular episode, I totally understand, and I encourage you to follow the hashtag RPGAday 2022 to find all the other people who are sharing cool stuff about their hobby and celebrating it through this event of role-playing game positivity. Anyway, I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll interact, especially while Anchor still makes it easy. And until next time, take care.